I'm going to share again. I hope I don't get kicked out again. So, right, okay, so you can see that, hopefully, should be all right. Yep. So now this second half of this.
Carmel, that hasn't come up on the screen my end yet.
Oh.
Can other people see it?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. It looks like I'm sharing it. Well, I'll share it again. Can you see that?
Yep, it's come up that time.
It's there now.
Ooh, I've got gremlins this afternoon. Right, okay. So this second half of this session, we're going to think a little bit more about this issue of belief, because it's a really, really important one, and it's a really difficult one. And actually, somebody else, I don't think she's here today, Kelly, I don't think she's here this afternoon, but Kelly said this morning, she was talking about how she's very knowledgeable and she goes on lots of training sessions, and that people don't just listen to her. They don't just see her as somebody who knows about ALN and refer to her kind of, and why that is. So that's what we're thinking about. Why don't people just kind of accept these ideas that are around about kind of what is inclusive practice and all the rest of it? How do these beliefs operate within the system? Okay, that's what we're going to think about next. And in order to do that, I'm going to just say a little bit about the ideas of Charles Peirce. Now, Charles Peirce is an American pragmatist. He was writing at the same time as John Dewey. So this is a school of thought within America in the 1920s and 30s, very influential. Their ideas are really influential at the moment because they wrote about education and learning as this kind of learner-centered, child-centered phenomena, but always you have to consider the context in which it's taking place. So that's what Jonathan Glassard was talking about this morning as well, that with education and with the education of any type of learner, not only do you think about the learner, but you also have to think about the context in which the learning is happening. That's really, really crucial. So these kind of pragmatic ideas around education have been very influential in the last kind of decade or so. And Charles Peirce, his ideas are part of that school. Now, he wrote about belief systems. And what he said, if you look, this diagram starts at the bottom at number 1. What he found was that actually people's belief systems are very tenacious. So the things that we believe them as a kind of core part of ourselves, our being, and we are loath to give up our beliefs. We don't give up our beliefs very lightly. We tend to hold on to them. Okay, so belief has got this tenacity to it. It's we believe certain things and we tend to try to stick by those beliefs. Now, if something happens where it kind of shakes our belief a little bit and we think, oh, actually, maybe that's not right. So if we kind of think that all learners do everything in exactly the same way, but then we see somebody doing something a bit differently, but yet they're actually doing quite well, that might kind of shake our belief a little bit. And where we're not able to hold on to our belief, what we tend to do is we tend to appeal to somebody who's kind of we see as an authority. So it might be somebody who is higher up than us in some way, or somebody who's older than us, or somebody that we might see as more knowledgeable in a particular area. And we tend to appeal to that person and say, isn't this right? Aren't I right in thinking this? But the person we tend to appeal to is somebody who we might be thinking this subconsciously, is actually just going to confirm our original belief. So that's the kind of tenacity of our belief system, that even when it's shaken, what we do is we tend to go to somebody who's probably going to confirm it for us, that actually that belief is right. Just ignore that because that's not right. Yeah, you were right in the first place. That's the sort of kind of interaction that we're looking for. Now, where our belief gets shaken and that appeal to authority doesn't actually reconfirm what we originally believed, that kind of leads to a kind of crisis of belief. I mean, it's not necessarily a major kind of crisis of belief. We're not talking about faith or something like that. But it can be that actually this fundamental thing we believed, suddenly it might be actually maybe that's not the case, and that we have to kind of entertain this idea that this thing that I've been kind of operating by, this belief that I've been operating by, maybe that's actually not right and have to rethink it. And that's where you kind of start to develop a new idea. But I think what Charles Peirce's work, and what the point I'm trying to get across, is that that is actually a stage which doesn't necessarily easily flow, that you don't necessarily quickly get to that stage. Beliefs are quite intractable. And that's, I think, what a lot of what we see within inclusive education, that, you know, the part of the reason that actually not all schools are inclusive and not all education systems are inclusive is this tenacity of belief and these different beliefs that operate. So where a new idea starts to emerge, then this is kind of a really, really important stage, because obviously it's at that stage that people can change in relation to their belief system. So a practitioner who believes, you know, that what you've got to do to learners is you've got to teach them certain things, you've got to teach them social skills. Let's say an autistic learner, you've got to teach them social skills, and then they'll be kind of a little bit less autistic, and then they'll be able to function much better within school and within life generally. If that's your belief, maybe you're starting to be kind of a bit shaken in that belief. You're not really quite sure that these social skills groups work very well. And also you've read stuff about how actually autism is something that doesn't just go away in somebody's life. You know, it kind of is a lifelong thing, that you start to develop a kind of new idea, and you start to look around for kind of like, well, what could replace this belief that I've got? And that is a really crucial moment. So for Kelly, if she was here, I would tell her that that's the point at which she needs to come in and say, actually, I've got a lot of expertise in this area, and you might be interested in talking to me, because people are not necessarily receptive to that at stages 1 and 2. So this is where actually and this also came up this morning, this idea of kind of gathering new information about an issue becomes really important, because where your belief system starts to get shaken up, and where you start to sort of think, well, maybe I need to think a bit differently about this learner or these learners, having new information, and having new information which is quite reliable information, something that you can actually kind of put new belief into, is really quite an important process. And there's been a lot of research recently, people like Mel Ainscough, Kiki Messieu, there's a whole range of researchers who've been looking at ways of kind of supporting schools to gather information, new information about learners or about the situation, that's going to support this kind of change of belief systems. Okay, so things like lesson study is definitely something that has been written about a lot as this kind of way, I mean, it's not objective, but it's a kind of systematic way of kind of looking at what you're doing, and then looking at what others similar to you are doing, and then having a conversation about it, and thinking about, well, you know, when I practice, how much language do I actually use in class, and what is the level of my language of instruction? And it's kind of lesson studies, this kind of supportive way, isn't it, of people thinking about what they do, and also thinking about what others do, and also thinking about maybe slightly different ways of doing something. And it very much feeds into this idea of this creative thinking together. So what Lanny Florin was talking about, these kind of collaborative practices that are very rich and fruitful in relation to inclusion, where people can sort of start to think together, but they don't feel judged, and they don't feel as if they're under threatened in some way. They can do it in a more trusted, kind of supported environment, and think about practice. And then, of course, a key area is talking to learners themselves, because what research very clearly shows is that when you talk to learners, I mean, I've had this experience many times, you get information and you get insight that you wouldn't necessarily thought about yourself. Learners have got this way of telling you about something, and it's not really how you had thought about it. They kind of offer this often quite unique or kind of shift in perspective, and it can be challenging, but often it's very it's usually very interesting, actually. So talking to learners themselves, and that's why there's been a lot of emphasis on kind of consulting learners and learner voice and all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the other area is then being able to try out things, and again, that might have something to do with the setting that you're operating in, because some schools are very responsive to people trying out things and them going a bit pear-shaped or not, and other schools, you know, people don't feel quite so confident about trying out things and making mistakes and doing things a bit differently. And so that's kind of where the culture of consultation and culture of thinking together and culture of kind of being creative and trying things out, that's where that kind of comes into play. That's really very important as well. So I think what I'm trying to say in this, just to sort of sum it, is this issue of belief, what people believe about what they do, is not a straightforward issue, and it's not something that is just quickly sort of put to one side or gotten over. It's actually quite kind of a something that itself needs to be thought about and worked with quite carefully, and actually comes into this whole domain of educational practice, you know, around when I don't know if you know, that whole area of coaching and mentoring and supporting professional development. Inclusive education definitely comes into that area. How do we sort of support people to think about their practice in ways that feel safe and supportive and encouraging, as opposed to kind of judgmental and all the rest of it? Because working with learners who learn in different ways can kind of shake your confidence as a practitioner. So that's what you're also dealing with, you know, dealing with people who are maybe not feeling quite so confident in this area. So it's not an easy area of practice. So what we're going to do now is we're going to come on to our second activity of the afternoon. And I'm just checking the time again. So this is now thinking again about the professional standards, which was mentioned this morning. Now, just to say with the professional standards, so what's happened with the professional standards for teaching and leadership in Wales is that they were obviously introduced some years ago, but really in relation to those of us working in the area of inclusive education, in some ways they kind of missed a trick, because one of the key or core strands of the standards is not inclusion. So when you get professional standards in different education systems, sometimes inclusion is one of those core standards. So for example, in Portugal, which got a very good report a couple of years ago from the OECD, they've got inclusion very much as one of their core standards. And it's one of the, I don't know how many pillars they've got, but one of the areas that schools get judged by. So in Wales, that hasn't happened. So professional standards for teaching leadership does not have inclusion as a core strand. But actually, if you look at the standards, you can start to see areas or standards where actually the practices that we're talking about and the ways that we're working are very, very applicable. And that is what that standard is about. So I've posted the standard for schools and also the one for FE colleges. I don't know if anybody's in FE college in the chat, so that you can get access the link to those. And we're going to give you, so if we give you well, until 10:02, so that's about 8 minutes, just to have a very quick look at them and have a quick chat amongst yourself in your two groups about kind of what you know about the standards and where a particular standard might be particularly relevant to the area of inclusive education. And then we're going to come back at 10:02 and just have a quick feedback on that. So I'll stop sharing now, and perhaps we could go into our breakout rooms. Thanks, Anne.
Opening the rooms.
Thank you. It's all going smoothly now, right at the end.
Right at the very end.
Oh, well, sod's law.
Oh, it's funny, on the breakout room rundown, it says that Sarah Lloyd is in the breakout room, but it also still has her listed as being here.
Do you need to pause the recording, Anne?
Oh yeah.
That's funny, isn't it? And also that